We've all heard the words, "In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue." And we always thought Columbus discovered America. However, we've recently learned that almost 500 years earlier, another group of people visited America, built homes, hunted, and explored areas in Canada and New York. Today's story is about the Norse Vikings, or Norsemen, who really discovered America. Norsemen, people from the far north countries of Norway, Denmark, and Sweden, were great seamen known as Vikings. Their longboats were light and fast. As many as 60 men would travel together in one ship. Sails and oars helped them speed across the water. The Vikings ventured to the ends of the known world to trade. As a young boy, Leif Erikson traveled with his father, Eric the Red, and his whole family to a new land which they named Greenland. It was not really very green, mostly snow and ice. Leif stood in the prow of his father's Viking ship as he sailed across the snowstorm sea. He watched the rows of waves rising like 1,000 fences between him and his soon-to-be new home in the west. Leif grew up in Greenland and became strong and cunning as a chieftain's son should be. He sailed his ship, threw his spear, swung his axe, and from his father he learned to be swift as an arrow and quiet as a mouse. On dark moonless nights they saw a fire in the sky. What could it be? Beautiful colors lit this sky, and they could see each other's faces in the dark. They marveled at these northern lights that danced in the night sky. Life was good in Greenland. They played chess, had great feasts, and shared stories of the outside world. Young Leif was all ears the night a sailor named Bjarni Herjolfsson told of being blown off course in a storm and seeing a forested shore far west of where anyone else had been. Everyone laughed because Bjarni was not curious enough to explore that land. As he grew up, Leif kept thinking about the story of the new land, and after a while he bought Bjarni's ship, gathered a crew of 35, and sailed westward following the directions Bjarni gave him. He and his men sailed and rowed for days. A great storm caused the waves to rise so high they nudged the moon, and his ship swayed like a rocking horse. For a long time it was thrown about on the sea. Leif called, "Watch out for that iceberg!" They rowed, and they rowed, and they rowed. Then the wind calmed down, and a heavy fog fell over them. Leif could see neither whales, nor the stars, nor the sun, nor the color of the sea to guide his way. But he sailed on. At last the fog lifted enough for Leif's keen eyes to pierce it, and there straight ahead he saw land. It was a beautiful land, with green forests of strange trees growing all the way down to the shore. He sailed up to the shore and landed in the mouth of a river. By the way the sun stood so high in the sky, Leif knew that he was very far to the south. He and his men explored a bit, but they found no evidence of people anywhere. Maybe nobody lived here. Leif said, "This is good land. I say we stay and explore." Leif and his men went ashore and built themselves houses. There was no ice that winter, and there was plenty of fodder for the animals and food for themselves. The rivers and lakes were filled with salmon, and the earth was black and rich. The following spring they planted their crops and found wild grains, grapevines, and all kinds of fruit. Leif was so pleased, he named the country Vinland, or Wineland. One fair day, when all was pleasure and joy, the Norsemen saw a number of skin boats rounding the curve in the river. In the boats were dark-skinned people with black hair. Surprised and curious, everyone stared at one another. The people landed their boats and approached Leif carrying beautiful animal pelts. Such fine furs! What could the Norsemen offer their guests? Looking around, they offered them the butter, cream, and cheese they made from their cow's milk. After one taste, the people Leif called Skrælingers were ready to trade their furs. Still needing something to trade, the Norsemen offered pieces of cheap red cloth. A ribbon of cloth for a beautiful fur? When the cloth and the cheese was gone, the Norsemen had a huge heap of furs, and the Skrælingar proudly strutted about wrapped in their red ribbons. After a time, the Norsemen longed for Greenland. Now they knew their Vinland already had other people living there. Greenland belonged to the Norse and their families. Nobody else already lived there. In the spring, Leif and his men loaded their ships with precious timber, grapes, and furs, and sailed northward to Greenland, the glaciers, and their homeland. Arriving home, family and friends ran to meet them. They celebrated in Eric's smoke-filled hall and listened to amazing stories of wild animals, dark-skinned people, and the rich land with pleasant weather and so many trees. A year later, Eric, now an old man, died, and Leif became the new leader and sat in the high seat. While the ice closed in around Greenland and locked it away from the rest of the world, all of the Vikings sat together in the smoke-filled hall. As long as Leif lived, visitors from Norway and Iceland loved to hear the stories of Vinland and the brief encounter between the Norse and the Native Americans. As time passed, locals forgot, and Europe never heard the story of the new country Leif called Vinland. And so it would be almost 500 more years before Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and it would be the 20th century before the world learned it was really Viking Leif Erikson who discovered North America.
Sitting right now just the way they're supposed to be.
They follow direction very well.
Yes.
Good job. Good job. Okay. If you were an Indian, would you go back over to where you put your costume on?
Take a picture of my face.
Yes. Everybody over here. Brother, real quick. The Indians sit in front of the group.
You guys are going to have to squish in.
Indians sit in front of them. Indians have a seat in front of everybody. Indians, sit.
Listen, guys.
Sit.
Ready?
Go. Kind of bend over. Put your hands on your knees. Put your hands on your knees. Like bend over.
There you go. Ready? Look at me. Okay. Bend down a little bit, Aaliyah. There you go. 1, 2, 3. Cheers. Good job,
So,
guys.
Indians, go back to where you put your costume on and lay it down.
Careful.
Careful, careful.